Hello and welcome back to the first episode of season 2 of the Runaway Train Sports Podcast. It has been quite a long time since I've had the pleasure of speaking to you, as life got in the way last year, as it seemed like it did for a lot of people in a lot of ways. But we are back. We are ready to talk about the Oregon State game briefly, as well as a look ahead at the UConn game this weekend. It is so nice to be back and recording. I really intended to record a season preview kind of outlook podcast, but I've actually been moving for the last month, it feels like. And if you're watching the video version of this podcast, you can actually see behind me, there's still a lot of boxes and a lot of things still to be done. But that's not going to stop me from recording this first episode of the Runaway Train Sports Podcast for you of the season, and I could not be more excited. So, what's the plan for this episode? It's going to be a relatively short one, as we got to see Purdue take on Oregon State last week, and probably take also a brief look ahead at UConn, which hopefully shouldn't be much of a game. But that's kind of on what's on the docket for today, as well as maybe a bit of a talk on what to expect from Boiler in Texas, as well as this podcast for the coming year, not just for football. But first, we're going to take a look at Purdue's 30-21 win over Oregon State to open the season. So like I mentioned, Purdue ended up pulling out a 9-point win, actually covering the Vegas spread of 7, and came out on top and looked pretty good. I'm going to say pretty good all in all. They definitely had some moments where it looked like they struggled a bit, and there was definitely some issues with execution throughout probably 3/4 of the game into the fourth quarter, where it seemed that the offense finally picked it up and was able to put some points consistently on the board. The first couple of series on both sides of the ball were, I think, just kind of feeling it out a bit, both for Oregon State and for Purdue. First game of the season, it might take a bit of time to really settle in, especially with crowds and fans being allowed back at games. And I'm also going to go ahead and get on a tangent real quick to say that even watching it on TV, obviously being in San Antonio, couldn't make it back to West Lafayette for this game, but watching the energy and feeling the energy of the crowd through the TV was probably got me the most excited about the potential return, making it back for a game this season. So I've already started looking at my calendar to try and figure out a potential game to make it back to, and I think it could be excuse me, a lot of fun to try and get back to West Lafayette for a game this season. But nonetheless, Purdue on defense came out pretty good early. Oregon State ended up scoring first on a pretty quick drive. It was Oregon State put together a 3-play, basically 65-yard drive in just over a minute. So the defense definitely had some lapses on that drive, but Oregon State ended up getting into the end zone. But from there, we really saw the defense really ratchet up the pressure. George Karlaftis was an absolute man. We're going to talk about him in a minute. And Purdue ends up actually answering the Oregon State touchdown towards the end of the first quarter with the Xander Horvath 11-yard touchdown run on a bit of a wildcat look that was a little interesting to see, and I'm glad it worked out. But going into the second quarter, I think is where we saw a lot of the execution on the offense kind of falter a bit. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, the second quarter is when we had the Milton Wright drop in the end zone, where Jack Plummer dropped an absolute dime onto the back half of the end zone and just went right through Wright's hands. So that's one of those things. That wasn't the Doru missed pitch. I think that was in the third quarter, actually. So we saw a little bit of just execution drops were a big thing. I'm not going to say questionable play calling, but just some inopportune or mistimed play calling meant that Purdue went into the half up 6, 13-7, which felt like it really should have been more. The first half also featured the missed, I'm going to say missed offensive pass interference on David Bell in the end zone, which ended up resulting in a subsequent delay of game and then a further subsequent unsportsmanlike penalty for an assistant coach being too far onto the field that pushed Purdue back far too far for a field goal, and kind of really cost us some points there, which really should have been 6, turned into nothing. So the second half starts. Third quarter, really quiet, actually. This is where we see the missed pitch from Plummer to Doru on the goal line, which would have been an easy walk-in. Luckily, the end of the third, like almost the exact end of the third quarter, Mitchell Finnerman put in his third field goal of the day to put Purdue up 2 scores, which I think a lot of us kind of breathed a sigh of relief a little bit when you break that 2-score barrier, and that's kind of when you start to feel a little more comfortable. Of course, that comfort didn't last very long, as Oregon State at the beginning of the fourth quarter put together a 7-play, 75-yard touchdown drive to pull back within 2. And I think this is where a lot of fans online, at least what I was seeing, which actually caused me to mute some people briefly. A lot of people were saying, they'd seen the script before. Purdue holds the lead the entire game, but then in the fourth quarter, they just can't get it done. They can't execute and end up losing in the long run. I think I also saw a stat which said that Purdue has like 15 losses by a single score in the last, I can't remember how many seasons. And so I think that wasn't helping people's mental aspect of it at the same time. So Oregon State pulls within 2 before Purdue goes on a 6-play, 37-yard drive later in the quarter. So actually it went back and forth possession-wise for a little bit. And I think this also included I can't remember if it was before this drive or if it was post this drive, where we had Corey Trice come in absolutely clutch on an almost busted 4th down conversion by Oregon State, where Corey Trice made a fantastic play to knock the ball out on 4th and short, which would have been a huge gain and probably would have put Oregon State in a fantastic position to win at that point. But Purdue goes on about the 5-minute mark remaining in the game. Plummer hits Payne Durham for a 5-yard touchdown. And I think it was that point where the script, you could really see the script start to write itself depending on which side you were on. But we had Oregon State immediately respond with a 7-play, 75-yard touchdown drive in a minute 43, which included a very, very long broken coverage passing play, which really set up Oregon State to pull it back within 2. So with just about 3 minutes to play, Oregon State's back within 2, Purdue up 23-21, where Purdue actually, for once, played to win the game, it felt like in a long time, rather than playing to not lose, which I think was crucial. We find ourselves on 3rd and short near midfield partway through this drive, and instead of getting conservative and running the ball, Jeff Brom calls a beautifully designed, beautifully called rollout pass over the top to Payne Durham, who had no one within 15 yards. And I think it was either David Bell or Milton Wright who got another crucial block on the safety, which allowed Payne to essentially walk into the end zone to put Purdue up to the final margin of 30-21. From there, Oregon State got hit with a couple of illegal touching penalties on the subsequent drive, in which that effectively ended the game. So on the offensive side, Jack Plummer ends 29-41 for 313 yards and 2 touchdowns, both in the fourth quarter to Payne Durham. Rushing the ball, I think Purdue did a very good job of staying committed to the run. I feel like in seasons past, they have really abandoned the run late, just because of the lack of success that you find earlier in the game. But Jeff Brom did a fantastic job to keep the defense honest, and really had to force them to stay at home. So Xander Horvath ends up carrying the ball 21 times for 81 yards and a touchdown. That touchdown coming on the Wildcat run in the first quarter to give Purdue its first touchdown. In the receiving game, this was, of course, and always will be, the David Bell show, who ended with 8 receptions for 134 yards. No touchdowns, but absolutely had some crucial receptions throughout the game to kind of keep Purdue, the offense rolling, kind of keeping it in momentum. And that was probably the quietest. I think just because he got kept out of the end zone, the quietest 130-yard receiving game that you'll probably likely see from him. And it's just kind of become expected at this point. Taking a look at the defense on the defensive side of the ball, this is where we get to finally talk about George Karlaftis, who was an absolute animal and was living in the Oregon State backfield in the first half. He didn't record a sack on the day, but he did get repeat after me, 8 QB hurries, which is absurd by the grandest of margins. And so he is going to be a nightmare for a lot of teams this year. And if he can stay healthy, I think that is going to be absolutely fantastic for this defense, which has been overhauled again for, it feels like, the millionth time in as many seasons. This defense played aggressive. They played fast. They did have trouble in the second half staying as aggressive, getting as much pressure on the quarterback. I think that was kind of just a lack of depth and, wearing down over the course of the game, which is kind of to be expected at a certain point. Jalen Graham was also all over the field, laying some big hits, as well as recording Purdue's only sack on the game. He was really nice. I think he's really adjusting into that sort of hybrid linebacker role that he's kind of taken on. Cam Allen played very well. He recorded Purdue's interception in the game, which he kind of really baited the Oregon State quarterback into making that throw, and then just jumped right in front of it and couldn't have played it, I think, any better. Let's see. In special teams, I think after the loss of J.D. Dellinger, more than a couple seasons ago at this point, I think we finally found a reliable place kicker in Mitchell Finneran. He went 3 for 3 on the day, both on field goals and extra points, and also hit a long of 48, which probably would have been good from 50 plus. So I think having that kind of weapon in the kicking game is going to be absolutely crucial down the stretch of the season. Punting, Jack Ansel stepped up, averaged 37 yards a punt with a long of 39. I think we would like to see that get bumped up a bit, but considering how up and down the punting was last year, I think we will take this is definitely improved on last year. So that is probably a bit more than a brief summary of the Oregon State game. It was fantastic to get to see fans back in the stands at Ross 8. I think the energy came through beautifully over television, watching it on TV. I think I even tweeted at one point, I just wanted to be in Ross 8 so badly at that moment. I think it was probably in the first half, probably after Xander scored the first touchdown, but it was fantastic to get to see Purdue come out. I think it was also really good to see them get into a game like this. Now, the real question is, should it have been as close of a game as it was? The answer is probably no. I think Purdue left at minimum 10 plus points on the field with drops or penalties or anything like that. There was the penalty that pushed Purdue out of field goal range. There was the Milton Wright drop. There was the Doru missed pitch. Purdue ran a beautiful fake field goal to Payne Durham, who just ended up dropping it, and the ball fell into a defender's lap. That kind of took away at least 3 points. So it was a 9-point win, which we will absolutely take. We scored 30 points, which we will absolutely take. But that 30 points realistically should have been 40 plus if you actually look at the details. But at the same time, these are the things that did happen. These drops happened. These small mistakes, offensive mistakes happen, but Purdue still found a way to win. When the defense tired out in the fourth quarter and Oregon State put a couple touchdowns on the board, Purdue was also able to then turn around and put up points of their own to kind of keep them at arm's length. And so I think that was really nice to see. These are the kinds of games, kind of in basketball, where you see those close games that you end up pulling out, that I think can really benefit in the long run. Playing a game like this versus, I'll use Nebraska as an example, played Fordham this week and won by 40. I don't think you learn a lot from that. I don't think you get a lot of experience to draw on later in the season from those kinds of games. You build confidence, which is important, but at the same time, I think it's these kind of closer games that especially can help you in the Big Ten as the season starts to wear down. Having that mental toughness to continue to attack, continue to play aggressively, and gut out a win almost no matter what. So from here, I think we're going to take a brief break, and then we will take a brief look ahead at UConn. Stay with me. And welcome back. We are now going to take a look ahead at Purdue's upcoming game against the UConn Huskies at UConn, which I think, as we've seen this season start, only looks more and more pointless to the everyman, it seems. But let's look at UConn and kind of talk about what we'd like to see out of the team as they go to UConn this weekend. I'm not going to touch too much on UConn's stats or much like that because it is not good. I mean, I'll sum it up by saying that they started their season at Fresno State, where they were absolutely throttled 45-0. They were held out of the end zone and only had 107 yards of offense and gave up 538 yards to Fresno State. This is a team that then followed that loss up by playing FCS Holy Cross and ended up losing by 10. And I think in that game they still only put up a couple hundred yards of offense. It is a team that is really, I feel, seeing the downsides of the 2020 season sitting out. They had a lot of guys transfer out. They didn't play in season, and so it was really hard to know what was going to happen. And then they come out and lay absolute. I think eggs is probably putting it a little too favorably for them. So much so where head coach Randy Edsall, and I think the span of about 8 hours, announced that he was going to be retiring at the end of the season. Subsequently, immediately almost followed up by him stepping down immediately with their defensive coordinator stepping up to be the interim coach. And so it seems like there was a lot going on behind the scenes in the locker room that was really not setting them up for much success this season outside of just the product that they're putting on the field. And so they have an interim coach step up who immediately has been making some changes, and I think this is going to be an interesting, actually a good thing for Purdue to see, because they're going to prepare for what UConn had put on tape already, but I think we can also pretty easily expect some massive changes as well. With an interim coach coming in, you see them wanting to mix things up. They want to breathe some life into the season, so I think Purdue is going to have their hands full from a mental standpoint of trying to prepare for a team that you really don't know what's going to put on the field. They made a change at quarterback. The interim coach immediately switched up the starting quarterback after the previous starter. I'm not even going to attempt to pronounce either of their names, but they obviously were not getting much done on offense. I think I saw that he is thrown for 230 yards and then 3 touchdowns and also 3 interceptions. So we're getting a new quarterback under center for the Huskies. And at receiver, they also have really only one guy who has stepped up at all. And he has 3 receptions for 60 yards and 2 touchdowns. And I think actually makes up a good chunk of their 350. It's not good. I'm sitting here looking at the stats, and it's just not good at all. Their running back has 100 of their 300 and something odd total yards they've had so far in 2 games. This is a team that is going to struggle to move the ball, and is also on the defensive side of the ball is going to struggle to stop Purdue. And that's the way it should be when you're playing a team like UConn, especially this UConn team, which has really... I'm struggling to come up with even the right phrasing to really describe how poorly this season has gone for UConn. I think, obviously, they've already lost to an FCS team at home. They got shellacked by Fresno State 45-0. And now you have this Purdue team, which I think could use a game. Actually, I'm going to go back to talking about how I'm not going to say pointless or you learn a lot less about from these kinds of games. This is a game Purdue needs right now. They gutted out a win over Oregon State in the first game of the season under the lights at Ross-Ade. Now they get a cupcake on the road, which I think is going to be huge, to build confidence for Notre Dame in week 3. This is some opportunity for the starters to gain confidence as well as the reserves to get some game experience. I want Purdue to be up by minimum 20 points in the halftime, extend that to 30 plus in the third quarter, and so then we get to see the reserves and the second strings or third strings get some run. This is the time to build that experience and that depth that you need as you go down the season. Having guys who have never touched the field late in the season due to injury or what have you, just necessary depth with 0 game experience, these are the games that you need to build confidence, build experience for the younger guys, and get them ready for the future. I want Purdue to win this game by 40, and I want to see the second stringers a lot. Pardon. This is a game Purdue has to win. If Purdue loses, you fire Braum and the entire coaching staff on the spot. And I don't even know what you do at that point. You hire a guy off the street to go the rest of the season. I think you just shut the doors and put a sign out front that says closed for season. Purdue will win this football game. I want to see them win by as much as possible because UConn is that bad. I want to see guys like Milton Wright get some touch, get some touches to kind of help him move past that drop. I want to see David Bell go for at least 2 touchdowns, which I would have to imagine that he will. Jackson Anthrop will get his touches as well. And then I believe it's come out that Braum is attempting to get TJ Sheffield into the lineup this season or this game. He's still, I think you described it as a game time decision, but is expecting him to play. So I want some of these other receivers to get some catches under their belt. I'm not worried about tight end. Payne Durham is a man. He went for 127, 130 yards against Oregon State. I'm not worried about tight end. I want to see the running backs get involved. I want to see a running back go over 100 yards. Xander got close against Oregon State but didn't cross it. I want to see multiple running backs get over 100 yards. I want Purdue to work on their running game and really figure out what it's going to take to be able to move the ball on the ground. I think that's going to be huge. I don't expect field goals. I don't expect many punts. I want to see this team build some confidence for when they have to go to Notre Dame the following week. That's what I want to see. I want to see Aiden O'Connell get some run. I'd love to see even Austin Burton get some run, even though I think I did see somewhere that he wasn't listed as the third string quarterback anymore, so I don't even know what's going on with that. But I would love to see some Aiden O'Connell get some run. I would love to see Jack Plummer come out and throw for 300 plus yards, a few touchdowns, and then get to be able to sit and rest the rest of the game. That's where I'm at. I hope this coaching staff is also there where they understand that this is the kind of game where they need to come out and win the game. Win the game. They need to not only win the game, destroy UConn. If you let a team like UConn hang around, that raises a lot of question marks that I don't know could be answered throughout the rest of the season. This is a game Purdue needs to win by 30 points. There's a reason the line, I think, started at 32 points and has subsequently moved to 34 or something like that. UConn is not good. I think if you can break their spirit early, they will fold. They will probably come out with some fire, potentially, for their new interim coach, but who knows? They've already lost 45-0. They already lost to an FCS team. If Purdue can come out, kill their morale early, I think Purdue will have a very easy time winning this game by 35 plus. And they should. They should try to. Think back to Missouri in, 2017? That was the 2017 season. Go to Missouri and blow out an SEC team at home. Go to UConn and blow out UConn by 50 points, by 60 points. As many points as you can get, take them. I am almost just done talking about it because there's really not much else to it. ESPN has this as a 97% favorite, and I'm guaranteeing that 3% is primarily just because it's on the road. UConn is just not good. So I'm looking at it. They're allowing 42 points a game this season, by the way. 41 and a half, if we want to get real specific. They're allowing 450 yards average a game. 450. 260 pass yards and almost 190 rush yards. Purdue should put up 200 plus rushing yards, 300 plus passing yards. Purdue should end the game 500 or 600 yards of total offense. Should. It's just facts at this point. And I feel like I'm just rambling on about how bad UConn is and how much Purdue should win by, but that's just how it is. That's exactly how it is. The over-under is set at 57.5, and I guarantee that's just because they don't expect UConn to score it all, and they're kind of leaning on Purdue to do the bulk of the scoring. Purdue will win this game. Purdue should win this game. 3 o'clock Eastern, 2 o'clock Central. CBS Sports Network. Be there. I'll be there watching. Looking forward to seeing the young guys get some run. And I think that is. I'm just going to wrap up my UConn preview with that because there's absolutely no shot Purdue should or will lose to UConn. If they do, I think you might as well just chalk the season at this point because Notre Dame is going to get ugly at that point. Ohio State's going to get very ugly at that point. Iowa's going to get ugly. Wisconsin's going to get ugly. Northwestern, which looked horrible in their game against Michigan State, will probably get ugly. Yeah. Illinois, maybe. I mean, Illinois has beaten Nebraska and played UTSA tough at home. They did lose, but they played tough. Nebraska is something. I don't know what to make of Nebraska, let's be honest. Did we go to Nebraska this year? I can't remember off the top of my head. But it is, if this game goes anywhere other than Purdue by a blowout, there are going to be a lot of questions to be asked. Okay, so I'm going to take another brief break here for a moment. We'll come back and kind of talk about what this season of the Runaway Train Sports Podcast is going to look like for the rest of the year. So stay with me once more. We'll be right back. All right, and we are back once again. We just wrapped up our, I'm not even going to say preview of UConn, more about my mini rant on how badly Purdue should win. And I want to kind of sit down and talk now about what is to be expected of Big Boiler in Texas, both the blog site as well as this podcast for the coming season. My goal is to have 4 football season, 1 a week, kind of covering the previous week's game, taking a look ahead at the next week's game, and then also potentially in the future work in some look around the conference, kind of talk about their games. I think this past weekend was pretty straightforward outside of Illinois losing to UTSA at home and not really looking good doing it. And who was it? Was the other one Michigan State and Northwestern? Northwestern looked pretty bad. I guess I'll just run through it while I'm sitting here. Wisconsin lost a close one at home to Penn State and didn't look particularly impressive in any facet of the game. Minnesota and Ohio State played. Minnesota lost Mo Ibrahim to a leg injury. I don't think I've seen exactly what it is. Ohio State looked a bit shaky before coming out and just out-athleting Minnesota down the stretch. Michigan beat up on Western Michigan. Indiana lost in absolute devastating fashion to Iowa, which was hilarious to watch. I think I knew exactly the mood I was going to be in the rest of the day when within 2 minutes of that game starting it, Indiana was down by 2 touchdowns and had already thrown a pick six. It was glorious to watch, made only better by Purdue winning that evening. Iowa looked very good. The defense looked very good. The offense looked a bit suspect at times, but I think that's also just Iowa at this point. Let's see, who else did I not talk about? I think I looked at most people in the West. Like I said, Illinois lost, Ohio State won, Michigan State beat the crap out of Northwestern. They had a running back of like 260, 270 yards or something like that. Northwestern didn't look particularly. This seems to be September Northwestern in its finest. Rutgers beat the crap out of Temple. They scored like 61 points in their game against Temple, which was very impressive. Penn State went into Camp Randall and won. It's very impressive. They didn't look particularly impressive in itself, but the win will always be impressive. Nebraska beat up on Fordham. Not going to spend too much time lolling on that because they already lost to Illinois. Iowa beat the crap out of Indiana. Wisconsin had a disappointing loss. Indiana, we're not even going to talk about. Maryland beat West Virginia at home in a very good game for them. They played very well. They hung in there. They won. Very impressive. Be interesting to see what Maryland does going forward. Michigan, like I said, beat up on Western Michigan. Not too worried about that, and that's pretty much everything. I guess at this point, I'll also go ahead and mention a game. I think probably the game to watch this week is pretty obviously Ohio State, Oregon. I expect Ohio State to win that game. Oregon didn't look particularly impressive against Fresno State in their week one. They ended up needing a late score to kind of hold Fresno at bay. So I expect Ohio State to win this one pretty handily. I guess if CJ Stroud kind of struggles as he did in the beginning of the Minnesota game, they could keep it close, but I don't think Oregon has the horses to keep up with Ohio State in this one. So I expect this one to be over, if not by halftime, by the end of the third quarter, probably. So I think that's probably the game. Oh, the other game I want to mention is Elastico. Iowa State. That's going to be a very, very fun one to watch, as it always is, because it's one of those games, kind of like the Indiana game, where you just never know quite what's going to happen, and something ridiculous will happen. Not will probably happen, but will happen. So game day, I think, is going to be in Ames for Iowa at Iowa State. I will definitely be watching that game for sure. I think it's going to be a very fun one. We'll also learn a lot about Iowa and Iowa State, which kind of struggled in their week one game. I can't remember who they played, but I think they took a bit of time to kind of pull away and kind of didn't look very impressive for a preseason top 10 team. So that'll also be a pretty fun one. I just went on a long tangent for a segment I probably should have covered in the previous section, but hey, I'm nothing if not an amateur at this. So getting back to what I was talking about, kind of the future for this upcoming year, this is going to be my second full season of covering Purdue sports to some degree. I'm looking forward to it. Like I said, for football season, we're going to try and do one podcast a week covering the previous game, plus looking ahead and around the conference. My goal is also to have a written recap of the previous week. I probably won't do many previews, written previews, and I'll probably leave that for the podcast itself because I think it's a little easier. I like the recaps because it just gives a place to get my thoughts down immediately after the game. And then looking ahead at basketball season, I think we will continue with the weekly episodes of the podcast. I think at basketball, I think I may start doing shorter preview individual episodes. So maybe doing 2 a week or 3 a week, or depending how many games are during a week. So have a recap. No, we'll probably just do, actually, this is me brainstorming out loud to you. So welcome to the mind of your host here. We're going to leave basketball for now. We're going to kind of continue to brainstorm on that. We have a little bit of time left. I am putting together notes for a basketball season preview episode of this podcast, because I think basketball deserves a full season preview more than anything, because we saw a lot of good things last season, and we saw a lot of good things over the summer that I really want to touch on as this Purdue team gets ready for, hopefully, their 25th Big Ten championship. But we will get to that later. I wanted to touch on it now, but I've realized I don't even fully understand or know what I want it to be yet. But I appreciate you all here for episode 1 of season 2 of the Runaway Train Sports Podcast. It has been an absolute pleasure bringing this to you. I hope you all enjoy the game. You will be able to catch me on Twitter, tweeting my emotions throughout the game. Hopefully they will all be good ones. Feel free to engage me there. We are also attempting to get the Instagram going again, but that was never really going to begin with, so we'll see what happens with that. But Twitter, you can definitely find me going forward for all things Purdue, at least all things my opinion on Purdue. But for now, I appreciate you all for listening to this episode, and we will see you next week after Purdue stomps UConn into the dust, and we see some names out there on the field that we didn't even know existed. But for now, and as always, boiler up, hammer down, hail Purdue.